this out. So we are going to be building something awesome, which is Reddit. So let's try to design Reddit. Again, have only 50 minutes, so let's really scope it down. And I will rely on all of you to scope it down. So ask questions.
Cool. So I guess, do we start with writing down what the requirements would be?
Exactly, like what are the functional requirements?
Functional requirements. Is that good size? I'll just like put the heading there, and then we can all like write down.
Yep. So, oops, sorry, my bad.
Did not. I'm using a touchpad, so this might be a struggle. I apologize in advance. But...
No, I clicked on the wrong one. So okay, there you go. So functional requirements. Okay. So functional requirements essentially means use cases or your user stories or whatever you call it. So let's define the functional requirements.
So to start with, I think we'd have a lot of CRUD operations with users. So user can create an account, user can create post, but yeah, they can submit post. Should I start typing these up? That'll probably be easier.
Yeah, but what you want to do is you want to ask me which one we are designing, as opposed to saying that these are the possible scenarios. Like the way I would phrase it is, hey, so what are we doing in Reddit? Are we building entire Reddit or are we building a portion of it? Right. So I would say we are building a portion of Reddit. Now let's define what that portion is. So at this point, again, just like you mentioned, like, hey, are we building, posting, user profiles? What are we building, right? Okay,
maybe
so
live streaming now, yeah. So
exactly.
If you could clarify on what portion of Reddit.
Okay, yes, absolutely. Okay, so what we want to start off with right now is just building Reddit's front page. Right? So when you go to reddit.com, something loads. So we are building that something.
Just the front page. Okay, perfect. So I think the next step would be to kind of list, okay, what does the front page consist of? Like, what are the components of the front page? And when I think of that, I think of, okay, we need like a table that, should we go into SQL design first? Or I guess it'd be better to label what the components are.
No, so yeah, so you want to design the components, right? So we are not designing a UI, but what we would be, but you want to know like what is my version of Reddit, right? Because now, if you look at it, I significantly brought it down to just front page. Now, front page has multiple things. One, it has posts, right? So we'll have posts. Now, the second question is, how many posts? How many posts are you showing when you load that page? So let's say I show top 50. So there you go. There is one small tip or hint that you got, which is top, right? So now you need to dig further on. So let's start digging more.
Right. Cool. So we have the top 50 posts. We also have users, because if you go on the front page of Reddit, it always says like what the users are for that post, right? Kind of underneath, in the hyperlink. We also have comments. So comments are also prevalent on the first page, and people use that to gauge, the popularity of a post. And speaking of popularity, we have upvotes and downvotes. So this would likely be like a relational table, many to many, something like that. Everything else, there's trending. Trending. So trending is a subsection of posts. Another further categorization of posts, maybe trending. And finally, and we're only talking about the front page. I won't get into like the user functionality because I feel like those are separate components. So yeah, I would leave it at that unless anyone else can think of anything.
Perfect. So let me ask one clarifying question. When when I load the page and it's showing me top 50, how is it getting there? What is that top? Like, what is it based on? Just
Yeah,
no,
based on daily active users and how many posts each user is doing per day. So we have to drill down, like, is it like out of 500,000 or 5,000 or
so usually the top 50, from at least from my perspective, from my
Mhm.
observation, is either on comment count or it's on upvote and downvote. So it's basically interaction with the post, right? So what you want to essentially do is ask the interviewer, like, hey, what is this top? Like, what is it based on? What is the
Mhm.
algorithm behind getting that top, right? You can throw
So
your idea.
dig deep into these sort of things, right? Dig deep into
Yeah,
the components.
yeah. You don't want to make an assumption that top is, number of active users or number of live users or whatever it might be, right? Because you don't necessarily know what the interviewer is thinking. So always clarify. That's why I said there's a hint on the top. So the
Oh,
question,
right.
right? So the question would be like, hey, what is this sorting mechanism? Like relevance. Now it can't be relevance because we are designing.
Geographic,
Right,
right?
geographic could be another one. So let's pick one,
Mhm.
and I would say it would be the ratio of upvotes to downvotes, right? So
Okay.
higher the ratio, the the post is on the top. So it's voted in that way. And then we can dig more deeper, but I think this should suffice for now.
Perfect. I guess the next step would it be to kind of dig into kind of the model for these components, how we represent them in our
Mm-hmm.
system. Cool. So I'll take a stab at this.
Don't
So
we
go ahead. Sorry. Go
don't we
ahead.
discuss the non-functional requirements?
Right. Actually, so a couple things. One is the functional requirements are not quite complete
Mhm.
because there is other part to it, which is there are two types of front pages. One is when I load as a user profile, and one is the generic one, right? So the question you definitely want to ask is like, hey, is this a logged in page or is this
A
non-logged
guest,
in?
I guess.
Yeah, a guest, right? So you want a guest account, guest. Now we come to non-functional requirements. Now, what is non-functional requirements? Uh, if you are not aware, read about CAP theorem, but I'll go into brief details. There are
Mhm.
whenever you have a distributed systems, basically your web apps, mobile apps, there are certain key metrics based on which you determine, how healthy the service is, right? And what are the requirements for that service to be healthy?
Uh,
Because if the service is functioning for 8 hours and if the requirements are for 8 hours, then it's 100% working. So what is that? What are we looking at there? So there's reliability, there's availability, there's consistency, right? And there's one more. What am I forgetting?
partial tolerance?
Sorry.
Partial tolerance.
Partial tolerance. Fault
Partition
tolerance.
tolerance.
Fault tolerance, yes. So now let's drill down into those, right? So let's talk about consistency. Now, consistency basically means is the data consistent right at the moment? Meaning, let's say when the up think about stock market. Stock market is a perfect example. Stock market is a consistent. Your banking app is consistent. You see what is actually happening real time, right? It is everyone sees the same price. There is no delay. Uh, Twitter is eventually consistent, meaning if you tweet, and if I'm following you, I might not see at that time. I might see a little bit later on, and that's okay. If I follow 500 people, if there are two people who are following the same 500 people, the order of the post might be different. So that's being eventually consistent. So for Reddit, we can be eventually
right.
consistent because it doesn't matter. It's not something that needs to have that kind of consistency. And what this can do is this can limit your system. You don't have to make uh, a robust system like a banking application. Now comes availability, right? So what about availability?
So is that like the time before like a problem occurs, like the amount of like uptime per se?
Yes, uptime, exactly. Uptime is what it means. Thank you. So the uptime, I would say highly available. I'm not going to define a number, but usually this means 3 nines or 2 nines. Usually 3 nines is what it means. But again, it depends from application to application. For example, if you're running a business application and it's only required to function during business hours, then your 99.9% is between 9 to 5, whichever time zone it is. So that's
what is the time frame? Okay,
exactly. So I'm not going to define that number here, but I'll just say it's highly available. And then we have reliability, right? So how reliable is the system? So I would say this should be highly reliable, and it should be fault tolerant as well. So give me one moment.
So the distinction between reliability and availability, how would you define that?
Sorry, what is the question?
Oh, the distinction between availability and reliability. I know they're kind of like synonyms, but in this case, if I remember, it has to do with the amount of problems we have versus availability is like how long it stays online. But like if there was a problem in the application, then it would not be reliable, if that makes sense, even if it's still
exactly. I'm not sure. So how
wouldn't that be called fault tolerant, where if the system faces any issue, it should be fault tolerant enough to handle the issue? And I mean, like, instead of giving some 500 or something, it can give something user friendly, something like that.
So this three, so basically reliability and fault tolerant are, it basically means that your system is reliable, which is what someone just said, meaning if there is an error, then it is giving you the right error, right? It's telling you 500. If you're forbidden, it gives you forbidden, right? So you can rely on the message that is being given to you as a service. Does that make sense?
Right. And sorry, fault tolerant. Sorry, just to like clarify, what would that entail? Or sorry, you were getting into that.
Fault tolerant, at least from my understanding, is basically when, let's say, you have a distributed system, so it's across multiple different data centers and stuff. If one data center goes down, your service is still available. So it is fault tolerant, right? So if there's a hardware failure or if there's a software crash, your service is able to recover by itself until a manual intervention is done, right? So if you have, let's say, web service which is running in US, California, in a particular data center, and that's the only place it's running, and that data center loses electricity, then your system is not fault tolerant because now the system is not available, and you just like your website or web app is unavailable at this point. So it should be fault tolerant, if that makes sense.
Perfect. No, thank you. That's very clear.
Okay, so let's get into this. So what I usually do is I start with a very high level overview, right? Over here, you still don't know. I mean, your functional requirements, but let's start with the extremely high level overview, which is what the system flow looks like, and then we'll get into details.
Cool. So I guess a user arrives on the page. I guess at that point we know their IP address, their browser. So for example, they're on a desktop browser or like Google Chrome, in addition to like IP information. And then we serve them a front page, and that front page will consist of the most recently calculated top 50. Now, in this simple design, we're just going for a universal top 50. We're not doing anything geographic, right? That's based on the ratio of upvotes to downvotes. So that would be something that we could cache, right? Because it's going to stay pretty constant, right? For many users. So we serve that page to the user, and then they can go ahead and interact with it. So upvote or downvote a post. just on that page, and they can also view how many comments there. And then if they like, they can exit our front page and go view that post to interact with it.
Okay, sounds good. Let's start designing the system. So start drawing boxes and whatever it is.
Let's see here. Sure. So I guess front page. Oh, sorry.
Let me know if you need any help.
Oh yeah. If anyone's good at drawing, I was not very good at art as a child.
So let me.
Yeah.
So
we have our front page.
So again, let's do one thing, right? Let's skip the front page because I'm not interested in the UI part. So let's keep this one over here. Let's start with your web server. So you have a web service here, right?
Cool. Oh, so we want to talk about the design of how we would actually kind of the back end of this. I see.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not interested in the front end at this point.
More like client-server communication. What all components you would introduce between?
A request comes in, load balancers.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Maybe a CDN at the start. So would it be smarter to start with a user request as like the first box, and then like an arrow to where that goes, and then
I think.
What do you guys prefer?
So you can have it as a front page. You can call it user. You can call it client. Either way is okay.
Client. Okay.
Yeah,
I see.
Any of those are okay.
Oh, so let's just call this guy client right here. Cool. So the client arrives. So initially when he arrives, he's going to see, he's going to hit a load balancer. Oh, cool. You can add those. Sick.
I have some of those. I'll just keep on adding them, but please go ahead.
Cool. So the client is going to visit a load balancer, right? And the load balancer will go ahead and determine what server he goes to. As far as implementation details, we could, in this instance, we could follow kind of a round robin sort of deal. I don't think we mentioned, we don't care too much when we were talking about the availability and reliability. Like, I don't think we need something with a lot of scale in this, because our page is pretty simple. It's not like it's a static page, right?
So fair enough, but let's also, again, zoom out, right? You're going into too many details too soon. Zoom out, finish everything end to end, and then we'll come back to one more then we'll come back to each component and start describing, because you want to hit usually for this services, the meat is actually in the storage, right? And it's in the storage, it's in retrieval, it's in the pipeline, all of that. So you don't want to spend too much time unless someone says, "Hey, I want you to talk about load balancer."
Okay, perfect.
So let's
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so they would hit that load balancer that would forward to our server. Now, as far as this kind of schema of our data, we're gonna have a SQL. We're gonna have a relational database.
Okay.
To represent, and I guess I should probably draw our tables out. Would that be good? Is that something that we would do later, or right?
Let's do that later. So you have a relational database. Now, what is this database holding?
So this database will hold the posts, tables, and basically the models. So that would be Reddit posts, users, and tables in this situation. Alongside that database, we'll actually have a cache, a Redis cache, and inside of that cache, we'll calculate the top 50. We'll cache what the top 50 posts are. And the web server will have a service that will actually periodically update this cache with new posts as they start to get changed. Now, because it's Reddit, we don't care too much about how accurate that is. So we could have a cron job that would go every 3 hours or so, and then that would actually go ahead and update the posts.
Okay,
but we'll hit the web service. Go ahead.
Let's put a pause there. Let's dig deeper into those tables. So you spoke about the tables. Give me a what are these tables? What are these tables holding?
Yeah. So a table for what's it called? So we have one table that represents users. So that would be your typical user information, such as like email, first name, last name, maybe other like additional fields as required. And then we have a table for posts. Now, what gets interesting here is that one post can have like a lot of comments, right? And like we want to be able to scale that really well. And we don't really care too much about all of the users who are commenting in a post. We care about who the author is because that's shown on the first on the front page. So a post will have like a key for author ID submitted by. In addition to that, so because posts usually have images in them, embedded images in them, we're actually not going to worry about that here. Instead, we're going to have a glob database like Amazon S3.
Yeah, let's not worry about images and videos for now. I want to talk a little bit more about the post table. So it has author ID. What else does it have? Like let's like flush this out completely.
Yeah, text and title. So the title would be like the title of the post, the text, the contents. And I guess like we'll talk about images later because if they put an image inside the content, right? But we'll worry about that later. And additionally, so the final question becomes the contents, the comments of that post. But what I think would be best, and I'd like to hear other opinions, is we keep a separate table that represents comments. And that table with comments will have a post ID. Right? And we're going to have a table that has one post ID and a comment ID corresponding to it. It would be like a table to join the posts with the comments. So that would be like another table. We could call it, a good name would be post comments, right? And then we have finally that comment table, right? As comments get edited and deleted, then that post comment table would have another key for like is visible, right? Because we want to store posts and comments just for like harassment purposes, so we won't actually delete them, because we could get like subpoenaed by the government, right? For example, so we would have like a visibility filter where that would actually get toggled in like a delete operation.
So let me ask you this: comments have comments, right?
Yeah.
How do we store those?
So there's like a tertiary table that links posts and comments. So it takes in like the post ID and the comment ID.
Why do you need additional normalization? Why does this normalization not work? Where you have comment ID, so every time I create a comment, a row is created here with my content, with my author ID, and with my post ID. Why do you need one more table for that mapping when that mapping is right here?
So you can't have the same comment on a different post. I realize that now, so we actually don't. So for some reason, I was thinking you might have a comment that is duplicative, but that's like the text, right? It's not the ID of the comment, right? So we can just stick with actually a single foreign key with post ID in the comment table. That would be sufficient. We don't need to go forward in hindsight.
Okay, so let me re-ask my previous question then. Every comment has a comment, right? You can reply a comment.
Like text, yeah, reply, yeah.
Right, there's a reply to each comment. Where do we store that?
So you can only reply to one comment at a time, right? So if I know there's some situations occur where you have like nested parent comments.
Yeah. So that's what I'm asking. You have nested comments, right? How do we address that?
What I think is if you have like a reply to key, and the reply to key will just hold the ID of the comment that it replied to. And now the one issue with this design is that if you want to load all of the comments that are from like a parent comment, for example, if there's a comment at the first, it just came on the thread, right? Like it's the beginning of the thread, and people replied to that, then The reason I think this might not be a huge problem is typically you go from the top to the bottom when you view the page, right? You see the oldest comments first. So if we have the oldest comment, we can actually recursively load the child comments just with that field. So I think that would actually be fine and an okay compromise. Alternatively, we could kind of have another field that stores like, okay, the ancestor, right? The first level replied to comment ID. But I think for our purposes, because the way people use Reddit is they view a page and they see the oldest comments first, right? That's why I think if we just have one field replied to ID.
So
right?
so
that could work. Yeah.
So here is something that maybe you guys know or you guys don't know is the reason the way Reddit is, right? Which is you exactly what you said. You load the page, you see only the top level comment, and then there's a button to click where it just goes and expand. That's a technical limitation, right? Because it doesn't want to fetch all the thread comments. It's a deep nest. So what it does is it makes the user click that comment so that it can actually go and fetch that information, as opposed to prefetching it and keeping it there. Maybe user wants it, maybe user doesn't want it. It might look like a UI decision, but it is more of a technical limitation, right? So that's
they're
how
kind of just hiding it.
Yeah, that's how they overcome such technical limitations. Because like for one user, it might be okay, but when you think like 50, 100, 300 million people accessing all that page, and you're talking about 100,000, you're talking about thousands of comments. In one top Reddit page, there will be at least 1,500 to 2,000 top level comments, and then each of them will have sub comments. So that's a lot. That's a very deep nest. So that's why they do that. So okay, so let's keep moving forward. If anyone wants to add in, please jump in.
I just have one question. Wouldn't I mean, like I missed it or the voice broke. I don't know what happened. So you were talking about the replies to the comments, right? Wouldn't that become like a comment to a comment, and can't we store it in the same table?
You could. That's absolutely. So you're saying you just take this comment table, and in that comment table, instead of post ID, you replace with parent ID or something like that.
Yes, some kind of an ID just to say that this comment belongs to this thread, kind of a thing.
You could, but the thing is, there has to be some sort of mapping that somewhere, maybe in your web service, maybe in your application service, right? See, your database can be completely agnostic of the fact that I don't know if this is a post or if this is a thread, right? Completely fine. But your web service has to be aware of that, because your client is loading the post followed by the comment, followed by the threads, right? So something has to be aware of that information somewhere, right? Now,
just to distinguish between a post and a reply.
Right, because think about it. If you're loading a post, right, your select statement will be to the comments table will be select star, select content from comment table where post ID equals this, right? So that loaded your post and that loaded your top level comments. Now, for each top level comments, you need to run another query, right? Saying select star where comment ID, where post ID equals your main thread, right? So you're running like multiple different select statements. So something has to be aware about running that. So either you can put that information in your database, or you can keep your database agnostic, something like you said, and put that logic in web service. Either one works.
So wait, so can't you just have, like, that the original poster where the parent ID is null? So that's a post. If the parent ID exists, then it's a comment.
No, from what I understood, as Pratim was saying, is your post ID. So this is basically, this could be a comment, thread ID, or this could be a post ID. It could be either of that. Did I understand correct?
Yes, yeah. So basically, you'll have one, and if someone comments under that same comment, then we can link that with the parent ID and say that this parent, so they both are connected or related, kind of a reply.
Exactly. So But all I'm saying is something needs to know what this parent is, right? Because it's
Yes,
interchangeable. So it needs to know what that information is. Okay.
Yep.
And then you can even have upvotes and downvotes. Okay, awesome. Now let's talk a little bit about how we are generating this top 50, because that is not easy.
At least in my opinion, so the top 50 is agnostic of a user's location. So that actually makes it a lot easier for us because it's going to be site-wide. There's no need to make, distinct top 50 lists, for different users and countries, which I think is the case currently right now.
Sure.
So, and the top 50 is going to be based off of the upvotes and downvotes on a post, right? And we have that column set, actually, upvotes and downvotes. So what I believe we would have a cron job that would actually scan the post table, starting by upvotes minus downvotes as a field and ordered by that descending, right? So we just start looking from the top to bottom, basically the ones with the most votes as a sort of, kind of shortcut, I guess, right? And we would take I think we could do this all in SQL, honestly. If we have a query where we create this field, like select upvote ratio as upvotes divided by downvotes, ordered by upvote ratio limit 50.
Okay.
I think we could just have a cron job that runs that query. It updates that query into the cache, in the Redis cache, and then we just read from that cache every so often, every 3 hours, we rerun that query to update the results if there are any changes. We could even add that in our query to check for if the IDs have changed, for example. And we fill those IDs into our cache and we serve new users.
Okay.
Now
so
the question becomes
let me pause you. Let me pause you. So so a little bit of information. Instead of cron job, you'll have a pipeline, which will probably a Mapreduce job. If you guys don't know what it is, read it up. But Mapreduce, it's based Mapreduce or Spark or something like that. But it's basically something that will go through your, pull out like massive amount of data and do exactly what was being said, which is, find out, like, pick all the posts, find out the ones that you want to filter, and then sort them and then store them somewhere. And that somewhere in this case was Redis cache, which also we want to get into. But let me ask you this: the key question that was missed was how many posts do we have every day, right? Because this cron job, how frequently is it running? And because if you're talking about 10 posts, sure, it's a very quick job. If we're talking about 1 million posts a day, that's a different problem, right? Because you can have bigger machines, you can have more machines, but you're going to pay for it. So this is where that big trade-off comes in, right? This is product technical trade-off. Again, it's a technical limitation, but product has to pay for that. So let's talk about that. So let's say I say that there are 1 million posts every day on Reddit. As a user, now one option I have is I say that, hey, every 24 hours I'll generate top 50. As a user, would you be okay with that? Would you be okay if Reddit only gives you top 50 once a day?
That wouldn't do good because the next we need to wait for the whole day to see the next best thing.
Exactly.
And it keeps on
right? So okay, so we can do it once a day. So now we have to do it. How about twice a day? What would be an acceptable answer? Let me ask you that.
Every
hour.
Oh.
Okay, so we have every second and we have every hour.
Every second would be the most expensive, I guess.
I use Reddit a lot, so
Okay, so every second is ideal. Every hour is somewhere we can live with, right? Now, as someone suggested, every second will be, because this problem gets amplified if I'm asking you to generate top 50 for a user. Because now you're running this exact same job for every user, and the things over there are a little bit more complicated because you're only showing
How-
me of the subreddits that I'm subscribed to.
Okay, that's
How
the
ab-
distinction.
How about we 50 in a case where the user refreshes the screen or the screen like user opens the screen for the first time, or he lands he went on to some post and he clicked on the home button again, and whenever the page refreshes, only then we show the top 50.
But then now you're leaving it in the hands of the user, right? There might be bots. You don't know.
That refresh every second, right? Something
Right.
like
There
that.
might be bots which are now your entire system is at the mercy of bots, which are always trying to bring down Reddit. Right? So
Okay.
you want to make a very conscious decision here. And I think every hour in this case is I think it's an acceptable solution in my mind. And this is something that you have to talk with the interviewer. But the key here is identifying the reasoning. Like you're telling the interviewer that, hey, I know we didn't speak about the front page for each user, but if we refresh this every second for every user, this job is not even going to finish. Like this job will not finish every second, right?
Yeah,
Just
it'll
this
be
job
outdated, stale, right? The cache will stay stale.
Exactly. So every second is out of question. Every minute, this job will not finish in every minute. So let's say we we run this. So coming to that, let's say we run this every hour. Okay.
Right.
So
And also, you mentioned, sorry, we want to use Mapreduce, right? Multiple, huge data set, horizontally scaling Mapreduce servers. Each server would compute whatever its average is or top 50, and then we would combine that data set into a larger one, right? Basically.
Yes, and you can have Mapreduce, or if you can, with 1,000,000 posts, you can potentially get away one with the cron job, or you will have a set of workers. But it's that one is harder to manage than Mapreduce because again, there are trade-offs there. Now let me ask this: why Redis?
Because the way like the support Redis has in terms of data structure and data storing is really good, and also the way that stores is the key value pair, so retrievals are very search retrievals and all are pretty fast.
Let me pause you there. So you mentioned that the data storage is pretty good. Expand on that. Why is it good?
Because the data structure support Redis gives, I just read it in some blog that the data structure support Redis gives is really good, and so any kind of data you want to store in Redis is really good.
So okay.
In
so
memory?
wait.
In memory? Sorry.
Hold
Yeah.
on. I still have a question on that. What does it mean by data structure support is good?
The way it store, so whenever you send data to Redis, the way it internally stores and the data structures it used to stores and maps data or the linkage between different kinds of data is really good and fast.
Okay.
We want to retrieve something.
Okay, good. I got that, and I'll come back to that. How are we storing data? What does our key value look like in this case?
Sorry, did we say we're doing it by user, or are we doing one for everyone?
Right now, we are just doing one for everyone. We're still sticking to that. So, like, if you load the page, if I load the page, it's the same. So, what does the data in Redis look like? Like, what is the key and what is the value?
I did not get the question.
So in Redis, you store key value pairs, right?
Yes.
So what is the key and what is the value in this case?
Timestamp and then. Sorry, go ahead.
No, what I just want to clarify, what is the scenario over here? Like, what exactly are we trying to?
So I was told there is a pipeline which calculates top 50 every hour, and then it pushes the data into Redis.
Okay.
Right. So what I'm trying to understand is one, why Redis. So we discussed that. Why key value? So now in Redis you have to push something, right? So that you can retrieve it. What are you pushing in there? Like what is the format of the data in there?
So key will be upvotes divided by downvotes, and value will be the post ID, something like that. We need to store.
Wait, why are we doing like that though? You can just keep the key as the hour that you're searching at, right?
Or like a date timestamp.
Yeah, and then
Yeah,
the
the date timestamp,
pipeline,
yeah.
basically the client will be feeding that date timestamp through the web service, and then the web service will convert that into a key. And then the value would just be a list of like all the posts, right? Something
During
like that.
that time.
JSON.
Yes,
JSON
or something like
Yes.
that. It doesn't really matter what it is, but it just has to be a list.
No,
And
so yes,
also
so
we need to, I guess also we, along with the timestamp, we should tell the user, because if there are two users and one user is in a time zone of CST and the other user is in the time zone of PST, and for them, due to the hour difference, it would be different set of posts, right?
okay.
Sorry, is that actually true if we use timestamps though? Because like a timestamp, like if it's we just convert it into like universal, what's it
UTC.
called?
UTC.
Oh yeah, yeah, UTC.
And also, this should be handling the web service part. We shouldn't be worried about the key value here.
Wait. What do you mean?
Like the web service should handle the like localization and preference and time zones and everything like that.
That's a good point.
Okay, so let me clarify certain things. Okay, so this works, and the reason is, don't think of, leave the time zones out, right? Think about, let's say we all are in one time zone. Doesn't matter, we are in different time zones. The posts are all in chronological order, right? So if in 1 hour the post, doesn't matter you log in from US or you log in from Europe, the post that is posted in the order, you will see it always in the same order, right? So in this case, time zone doesn't matter actually, right? Because in 1 hour, what we're doing is we're running this pipeline. We're saying, hey, what posts have been posted in past 1 hour? I don't care which part of the world it was posted. I don't care what time zone it was posted. In last hour, what posts have been posted, and then we do the calculation. So that's why time zone doesn't matter in this case. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now the second thing is this key value pair works, but someone mentioned that it doesn't matter what you store inside the list, right? You store the post or post ID, it doesn't matter. It actually does matter, because if you store the entire post as a JSON, that's a massive thing, right? Because we are not yet including videos, we are not yet including images. If you compress all of that in JSON, that's going to be a lot of data. So you're essentially having redundant data, because your MySQL database here, or SQL database, already has that information. So you don't want to have redundancy, right? So that's why you only store post ID, and then your web service makes calls to post tables saying that, hey, I have this list of posts. Can you give me all the post IDs? Can you give me all the details about the post?
Also, updates too, I imagine, would be a problem with the stale cache if we just store the whole post and then they see like something that someone leaked someone's private information in the post, but it's still in the cache, even though the post was updated, right?
Exactly. And if, let's say, you want, like right now, if you go and upvote, let's say we all log in together and all of us start upvoting, you'll start seeing those upvote numbers go up, right? Or go down, whatever it is. So if you have your upvotes in the Redis and upvotes in your SQL, you now have to manage data in two places, and you have no longer you have the source of truth. So you always want a canonical source. Now, one question that I did ask initially was why Redis, right? And the answer given to me was that the data structure storage is efficient, or it's better. Here's something that I would suggest, right? Do not, that is not true. Because the thing, I mean, it might be doing it, but that is such a nuanced difference that if only you have worked on the Redis engine itself or you have read about those things, you would know about it. It's very hard for you to know. So instead of Redis, explain about NoSQL. That's what I am looking for. I'm not looking for, you can use Redis or Memcache, it doesn't matter. And in that case, I would just say that instead of Redis, we would use a NoSQL. That's a much simpler answer. The reason for NoSQL though is what someone mentioned, which is it's stored as key value. So NoSQL databases by default stores everything in memory except for Mongo. Mongo is a document DB, but NoSQL databases, they store everything in memory, and that's why they are so fast, right? So try to avoid answering try to avoid going into topics that you don't know in depth, because someone might start poking around. I didn't know about Redis, like how it stores and everything, but I knew I could. I wanted to see how deep can we go, right? If someone starts explaining to me, then I'm like, okay, this person knows what they're talking about. So just an FYI. So don't try to stick to NoSQL. Just tell them, hey, this would be a NoSQL because it reads from memory and it's an instant lookup as opposed to running a SQL query. And we don't need anything complex. We don't need a relational table here. We just need, hey, in this hour, what are the top 50? And we're done, right? So does that make sense so far?
100%.
Yep. Okay. So we got, okay. Now, how do we, I think this should be good enough for now. The next follow-up usually, and this goes more for like senior roles and staff roles, is how do you make this scalable, right? We haven't spoken about that. The more difficult problem would be, what if I say that Reddit front page is not static and is for a user? This makes the problem much more complex. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about it? Do you want to brainstorm?
A distributed cache, I guess, based on user ID.
No. Okay, let me actually change the question. Where do you think the problem will be if we change the front page to user?
We're storing a lot more data that we potentially have to cache, right? Because it's like X amount of users will have their own live feed, right? So that's like times a million or how many users, right? Calculations or data stores that we might have to do.
True. But what about this pipeline?
Oh yeah, that's a lot of runs.
Right? How many, what does your calculation look like for this pipeline for each user? Because I don't want to see top 50 of anything. I want to see top 50 of subreddits that I have subscribed to. Does that make sense? So if I have not subscribed to, let's say, subreddit on dogs, even though a top 50 static has one of those dogs post, I don't want to see it on my page, right? So this pipeline gets even more complex because now
it's user specific.
Yeah, you're going user specific. So you're going to each user, you're finding which subreddits they have subscribed to, then you're going and finding which posts are top in those subreddits, and then you're posting, and then you're generating that.
Do we change the schema at this point and have like a new ranking that ranks all subreddits, right? So this table will be like maybe it's like a consistently updated ranking of subreddits of all subreddits, right? And then when we load a user, we just have to grab the user's subreddits, right? And then grab the associated ranking with those subreddits from the ranking table. So we already have that calculation done, right?
Well,
we're just ordering.
Where is the ranking?
So we have a rankings table. That's a ranking of every single subreddit against each other, right? And when a user loads, we just grab his subreddits, and we already have the ranking calculated, and it's going to be in place. because even if the numbers aren't adjacent, right? Like for example, 1, 2, we can still compare to each other based on the relative ranking of each subreddit that I'm subscribed to.
Got it. Makes sense. I think we'll have to, it will require a little bit more discussion, but I think you're down the right path. But in that case, you're talking about doing calculation of top 50 or top n of each subreddit, right? Because you don't know
of every subreddit. Yeah. I would say all the subreddits, not even top n, and then we can just do a limit query.
Right, but then your pipeline changes, because now your pipeline is saying that, hey, instead of doing top 50 across 1 million posts, I'm going to go into each subreddit and going to do like top 10, top 10, top 10. So now let's say you have 100,000 subreddits, and let's say you do top 10, so you have a million. Let's say there are 10,000 subreddits, and you do top 10, you have 100,000 posts. But now
that's a big number.
Even though that is, you still, when you pull for the user, you're saying, hey, for the user, for there's 50 subreddits, give me top 50. You have to do that merge, right? You have to pull all this 100,000 out, and then you have to merge them so that you show the right ones, right? So it's a very complex problem. That's why not everyone can build Reddit.
We can leverage the advantage that there is no ranking for these subreddits, so we don't need to show them in a particular order.
That's doable. Again, a product decision where you can say that when they call it relevance, I have no idea what relevance means.
Right.
Yeah. It's just something to make the user believe that, oh, it's relevant to me, but it really is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like if you show it to the user, if he sees cars before cats, right, or cats before cars.
There is no relevance in there, right? So it's again a technical limitation, which is overshadowed by the product itself, right? So just something you guys should know. Okay.
So
cool.
So what's very briefly? Sorry, what is the correct solution then?
There's we'll have to get into the details for that, and we can't discuss that in very short amount of time. But we can pick this problem up again, right? And I actually tried searching for a solution and I couldn't find anything. But we can work through it. It's not. It's right. It's more of a trade-off that we are doing, right? It's more about understanding those trade-offs, because you can't really know if the solution will work or not until you actually have some numbers. You need some gauge. Like, for example, let's say we have this top 50, right? And if I tell you that, hey, the top 50 pipeline is costing me $10 each run, right? Then we can make an assumption that, okay, the top 50 is going through 1 million posts. For each user, we might go through like a 10,000 posts. So this might cost us like $3 per user. So 3 times, million users. And then again, you have other things where you find out who are the active users, who are not. So for the active users, you pre-calculate. For others, you don't. So there are a lot of things that you can do to reduce your cost, right? But in the end, it comes down to the balance of how much money you're spending and what is the benefit of it. Because you definitely want your front page to load like instantly if the user is an active user. If they're logging in every day, you want it to load instantly, because otherwise they're going to stop coming, right? But for users who show up once in a month, you don't care, right? Because they're not showing up that much. They're not generating business for you. So these are the decisions that you can take once you know the cost, and that's what we'll have to get into details.
Cool.
I have a question.
Sorry?
I have a question. I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. My question is like, if we have 5 or 10 years of data, right? If we have so many data, how are we going to store it? And how are we going to put the old data that is not frequently accessed into the database?
So that is basically, there are different level of storages, right? So for example, the storage that you have in SQL and Redis, that is, you can consider Redis is the most expensive form of storage, not the disk part, but the one that is in memory, right? Because memory is the most expensive part. Then comes the SQL database. The SQL database is a little bit more expensive because it store like the storage itself is cheap. It's your hard drive, but the way it is storing the red and black trees or LSM trees that it's calculating every time you're inserting, so that is a cost, right? Because you're paying for compute in the end. Then comes S3, which is the static storage, right? You just push data in, and that's it. It just sits there. There's no SQL on top of it. There is no query power on top of it. It's a very simple save to file, right? And then even in there are like different versions where you can say, hey, store it in SSD, store it in HDD, store it in magnetic tapes, where your cost can keep on going down, right? So that's how most of the time data is stored. When like based on your product, you would know the usage. You would know that, oh, people are usually, like people only scroll Reddit so much, and if there are a million posts, they're probably not going to reach to the previous day, or they're not going to go beyond 24 hours rather. So you would only store like 24 hours in this hot storages, and then in cold storage, which is S3, you would store for last X years or X days or whatever it is.
And so if we want to query the like a 5 years data, we have to go query from the gold data, which is S3.
But you cannot really query S3. Like there are certain things that you can do, like there's Athena and all those things, but S3 is usually not something that you can query on. But your data retrieval will be slow, right? You might even consider putting it on some database which is like data lake, like Snowflake, right? Snowflake is a data lake. You can query on top of it, but it is not known. It's known to query large amount of data, not get fast answers. So data lake is another option where you can do it, right? So
What about a document DB? Sorry, go ahead.
So how long would it take for us to get the data from S3? So let's say if we searching for content from 5 years ago, how long would that take?
It would depend on the data lake on top of it, right? So if you have S3 and if you have like forget S3, but if you have like Snowflake, and even S3 has like Athena on top of it, it doesn't take that much time. It might take maybe a minute. Not even, right? It's still like Athena will index that somehow, depending on how you're setting the schema. But you're not. But it's again, the most expensive part is your compute, which is your CPU core. Then is the memory, and then is the disk. So the difference between memory and disk is so high. For example, a 4 gig memory will cost you, I think, $150 versus 40 terabyte will cost you $150, right? So the difference is magnitude high. So that's why you would still have it would still return within a minute, but it would take time. It won't be like something that you just load. And it's hard to answer that question because it depends on so many factors. Like it's what is the query you're running, how you have indexed it, how much information are you pulling.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, cool. We are over time. Thank you, folks. We have another one on Tuesday. And one thing I'm looking for people to talk to see how we can improve the community. If you're interested, please let me know. I would love to talk to you guys. Okay? Thank you so much.